Welcome to another installment of the Digital Cinema Show, a series covering the art, science, and business of motion pictures. This episode begins with two of the many engaging interviews we collected during the last Cinegear Expo. We sat down first with Light Iron's Michael Cioni to discuss such technology trends as anamorphic.
I actually think one of the things that we're seeing a lot, and there's some really great components with anamorphic glass and cameras with wider sensors and now some TVs that you can get and computer monitors that are widescreen. There's going to be a widening trend, and so our market needs to think about going wider instead of taller. And I think IMAX is cool, but I don't think the tall IMAX technique is actually something that's going to be popular going in the home or something like that. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. But we need to be thinking about a widening trend, and that's actually good for cinematographers and art departments to also think about as well.
And the value of 8K.
Are there diminishing returns? Yes. And what we have to remember is resolution is a tool. It's not just a contest. And I find more is more. And when you have more, you can do more with it.
We also caught up with renowned cinematographer Michael Goy, ASC. Michael is a past president of the ASC and one of the busiest guys in town, shooting and now directing some of the most popular shows on television. He discusses his career trajectory and philosophy.
You know, you're always aware of what is your shelf life, like how many years do you have in this business? When I sit at the bar at the ASC and I talk to all these incredible cinematographers, they all tell me, you know, I never knew that the phone wasn't going to ring.
To wrap things up, we reached into our archives for a short interview segment with the legendary DP Alan Davio, ASC. Alan comments on the archival value of having a film master with a story about the 20th anniversary re-release of E.T.
If it was my money, and I don't care whether the picture cost $100,000 or $100 million, I'd like to have a negative at the end.
Continue watching to view the entire episode or use any of the separate links to jump ahead to segments that may be of particular interest to you. In either case, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Digital Cinema Show. We welcome your input, so please follow us on Vimeo, YouTube, or our Facebook page. If you would like to support our efforts, please also consider joining the Digital Cinema Society. Membership's available to anyone, whether you can afford it or not. It's always free to students. We suggest a $30 annual contribution from those who can afford it, or a lifetime membership at $100. This episode is made possible by the support of Video Devices, a brand of video products developed by Sound Devices LLC. It includes the new Pix-E series of 4K recording monitors. This is James Mathers at Cinegear 2015, Cinegear Expo. It's here that we're catching up with Michael Cioni. He's the president of Light Iron. It's now a division of Panavision. You're always a great source of what's happening in technology, and talk about some of the trends that you see now.
Well, thanks. I think, one of the things that's been creeping up, I think, for over 5 years. I remember in 2010, I actually started taking photos. I have a photo library to do my research, and I was trying to watch how many widescreen commercials I was seeing on television, and then how many movies, when they play them back on television, were being played in their original aspect ratio. And I noticed networks like TNT were really open to playing scope images. So when they play Titanic or something like that, they play it in 240 on television. And I noticed the cable networks are more open to playing widescreen. Commercials started differentiating because they're trying to sometimes achieve a real high cinema, high polished look. They're going widescreen. Car commercials were the first to really drive that. And then actually bank commercials, I noticed, they started doing it. And it made me realize back in 2010, because everyone now had a widescreen TV, widescreen wasn't wide anymore. Sometimes you look at 16 by 9, you're like, that doesn't even look wide anymore. So in order to keep the widening trend going, you needed to go wider. So I actually think one of the things that we're seeing a lot, and there's some really great components with anamorphic glass and cameras with wider sensors and now some TVs that you can get and computer monitors that are widescreen. there's going to be a widening trend, and so our market needs to think about going wider instead of taller. And I think IMAX is cool, but I don't think the tall IMAX technique is actually something that's going to be popular going the home or something like that. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. But we need to be thinking about a widening trend, and that's actually good for cinematographers and art departments to also think about as
Oh,
well.
I love it, yeah. I understand that like 40% of the major features now are shooting anamorphic.
A number that we've never had before. And if you even go to like an independent group that's largely independent, like Sundance, you see half their movies are widescreen now. So it's definitely a huge change from 5 and 10 years ago in terms of aspect ratio.
And that's despite that we're seeing everything 16 by 9 and chopping off the top and bottom of
I
our
know,
picture.
I know.
So, what about 8K? I mean, there seems to be a little, people are getting tired of upgrading
Yeah.
HD. Everybody saw the difference between SD and HD. And some people see the difference between HD and 4K, but it's getting to the point of diminishing returns, it seems like, for display on 8K, in my opinion. I can see it for production, but what are your thoughts?
Well, first thing I would say is there was a time where people thought Jesse Owens would be the fastest person in the world forever. Today, he wouldn't even place in a high school track meet. You know what I mean? So how's that possible? And the truth is, we as humans always achieve more and can do more and can make more and experience more and run faster and fly faster and see more. And so I don't think that anyone who has said that's the best that will ever be is a name of someone we almost never remember in history. You remember the guy who says, no, I can go further, we can go faster, we can go stronger, longer. So on the one hand, I don't ever doubt what people think is perceptible, because I think history's told us what you are today is not what we will be as a society or even a being in the future. The other thing, though, is, are there diminishing returns? Yes. And what we have to remember is resolution is a tool. It's not just a contest. And I find more is more. And when you have more, you can do more with it. So if you just say I shoot more and I just keep scaling it down, yeah, the diminishing returns are absolutely there. Perception is going to be minimal. But if you just think about visual effects, VFX people get nervous about high resolution. But the truth is, most VFX people would say, give me a plate as big as the moon, because I can do more with that. When it comes down to rendering and output and what I'm making, that's a different story. But I can use more with a larger plate. I can do more with reframing, stabilization, tracking, all those types of components are part of resolution as a tool, not just as a thermometer for big and small.
And the barriers are coming down. It's getting a lot
Absolutely.
easier to shoot higher resolution,
Yeah.
per Moore's law and all that sort of thing. Well, what do you see about the merging now of production and post? I don't see how production could get any closer to set than it's getting.
That's a good point. But it can. There's one more step. We've been saying for quite a while, the production post, they're merging, and that's cool, that's true. But I really do believe that it's going to become so intertwined and fused that it's the camera that becomes post. And if you think about these computers that we use, we take footage out of a camera and then we put it in a computer and do something with it. Once that card comes out and goes in a computer, it's now in post as a state. Physically post could be anywhere, but the state of mind of post is after recording. Cameras are computers. The same supercomputers that we're using to hyperprocess these dailies and data and archive and backup are just going to be implemented in the back of the sensor. So instead of downloading the card and using the computer as a terminal, your computer terminal is setting up the camera computer to do everything that you would do afterwards. And then when you hit record, that's triggering everything to actually hit go.
Pre-edit from your storyboard.
Something like that. Something like that. So I believe that the camera next phase, the next phase of post is all in camera. And that is the next necessary fusion of production and post, where post begins to evaporate in terms of a visible process, but it's still just as important in an actual process. We still need the results for post, but we don't need to spend time doing it. If a computer can do it for us, in real time as you hit record.
Well, how does that work for somebody that runs a post-production company?
Well, it keeps me on my toes, and it forces me. I always say Steve Jobs, the favorite quote that I felt that spoke to me the most was, if you don't cannibalize yourself, somebody else will. And to me, what that means is by cannibalizing yourself, by actually eating away at your own business, it forces you to look at alternative businesses. Otherwise, you become stale and stagnant, and you get used to looking at what you start being very protective. And you can look at my Facebook page and see the evidence. People that have problems and are threatened by some of the things I say and do are the ones that aren't willing to cannibalize, to realize all they got to do is go around that corner and there's a whole new way to make a living. I had a guy on my Facebook this morning that said, I don't like your stuff, my family needs to eat. How dramatic is that? And the truth is, well, so does mine. You know, I got to do that too. And I choose to do it by not being afraid to look around every corner, even if that means some business I have today is not going to be lucrative tomorrow. That's actually good. It makes me feel liberated that I know that there are termination dates on certain services, as opposed to like finding out the hard way when you're you know in a bad spot. So self-cannibalization is necessary, and I can tell you that as running a post house, I already know what my next move is, thanks to cannibalizing some of the things I'm doing today, and I'm going to be fine. So, and then everyone will see what is next, and as we roll that out, it'll make sense. Oh, that's why.
Well, you're always full of surprises.
And hopefully good ones.
Appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Jim.
This is James Mathers at Cinegear Expo 2015. I'm here with Michael Goy, ASC. Michael is a renowned cinematographer, past president of the American Society of Cinematographers. I think it's fair to say that in the last few years you've mostly been doing television, a great depth of television, American Horror Story, Glee, comedy.
Yeah, my name is Earl. I mean, it actually took me a long time to get into television. For 10 years, I was trying to break in the door of television, and this was after I had shot, I think, 48 independent feature films, and the television still wouldn't hire me. And it wasn't until Jeff Jurr, my friend from way back in Chicago, called me in to do an additional unit for Invasion that he was shooting at Warner Brothers. And he told the producers, you know, Michael knows exactly what I want. He knows exactly the style of the show and stuff. And so they called me in for one night, and after I talked to the producers, I said to Jeff, you know, what is the style of this show? Because I had no idea what the show was. He says, you know what looks good. Just shoot what looks good. So I did, and they loved the footage, and I ended up working on the additional units for that entire year. And, you know, producers, they just love to talk, so that
Your name's out there. You're about as busy as anybody that I know.
Yeah, well, it's good. You know, you starve, you get busy, you starve again, so...
You've been busy for a long time, I know, and we're lucky to have you here today. Tell us, you've done a lot of movies, and now you're mostly in TV. What are some of the differences? You have to work a lot faster.
Well, because I did so many independent films that had virtually no budget, I actually have more time on American Horror Story than I did on a lot of the features that I shot. But in terms of the methodology, I really don't do anything differently than I have my entire career. Whether it's a feature or whether it's a television show, I kind of approach it the same way, almost from a documentary sensibility, because that's where I started from and that's what I love. And as a result, I still like to use, you know, basically 3 lights. I like to work fast. It's interesting that I was always known as the fast DP in this industry. That was my reputation. I was the fast DP. But now, since American Horror Story, I'm the artistic DP.
But you're still fast, I bet.
And I still shoot the same way I always have. It's just the labeling has changed. So, but it's really great. You know, the difference right now is that on this show, more so than any other television show or feature film that I shot, I'm able to kind of do what's in my head when I read the script. Ryan Murphy is very open to input and collaboration, and he wants to see what I bring to the table on his shows. So that kind of freedom is very unheard of on television, especially, and I'm very well aware of that I am in a privileged position.
Cameramen get typecast. I know I get typecast being the low budget or the indie film guy.
I'm always the Asian guy.
But like you said, you went from being known as the fast guy to the artistic guy.
Yeah.
How do you break down those
Well,
stereotypes?
I don't know that you break them down so much as you have to be smart about how you're marketing yourself. I mean, at the end of the day, all the artistry and everything that we get to do, which is play essentially, is great, but it's our job. It's what we do to pay for the kids' college fund. It's what we do to make sure our families are taken care of financially and the mortgage is paid and all of that. So that's the bottom line for me. I don't have the luxury of not working, so I kind of gear or take everything as it's coming, like notoriety for something I've shot, and see, okay, how can I spin this into something that will take me to the next level, which will increase my ability to take care of my family. You're always aware of what is your shelf life, like how many years do you have in this business. When I sit at the bar at the ASC and I talk to all these incredible cinematographers, they all tell me, I never knew that the phone wasn't going to ring again until it just stopped ringing. So, I always think about that.
Well, I know on television shows the cameraman works every week and guest directors come in. So, and a lot of times you're pretty much directing as a DP. Do you have aspirations to direct?
I am actually directing on American Horror Story. I directed an episode last season on Freak Show, episode 11, which was called Magical Thinking. And my contracts just got signed for me to direct 2 episodes this year on Hotel.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's, and I enjoy directing on that show because after this many years, 4 years, I know those actors so well, and they know me. And it was actually the actors. It was, I believe, Jessica Lange and Sarah Paulson who went to Ryan Murphy and said, why isn't Michael directing the show? Because he knows us better than anybody. And so that's how I got put into that position. But it's interesting on that show because I've directed in the past, certainly. But normally I like to work with a director of photography because I like to bounce ideas back and forth. I never like to assume like I have all the answers or at least all the right answers. So I like to have somebody else involved in that process. But on American Horror Story, it's actually faster for me to shoot and direct because it's such a massive show with so many moving parts that when you take one more voice out of the flow of it, it just speeds everything up exponentially. So it became a really comfortable fit. I'd do the rehearsal with the actors, and I already kind of knew what I wanted to do in terms of the setup. They go to makeup, and I'd explain everything to the crew. I bring the entire crew together. I say, this is what we're going to do in its entirety. And then they get it set up, and the actors come back, and we shoot it. So it's great to eliminate some of the guesswork because sometimes you love a director, but they can explain to you sort of what the first shot is, and then beyond that sometimes it gets a little fuzzy, and you have to massage it and find it. And we love all these directors for different reasons, and especially because they work well with actors. But on this show with me directing, it just flowed better if I shot it.
Yeah, that's a beautiful looking show. I'm sure it's going to be well directed now too. Well, thank you very much, Michael. Thank you for sharing with us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great what the society, your society is doing.
You've been a member for a long time. I would say you're a founding member.
And I can sort of almost understand like half of what's in your newsletter now. So
I appreciate the compliment. Thank you.
All right.
if it was my money, and I don't care whether the picture cost 100,000 or 100 million, I'd like to have a negative at the end. Because down the line, a negative will give you such a beautiful result when you go back to it. We had the wonderful experience this year of E.T. coming out on its 20th anniversary, and people said, well, what did you do to restore it? I said, we didn't do anything to restore it. It was that back in 1982, we did not make too many prints off the original negative, and that negative got stored in a vault that was at the proper low temperature and low humidity. And guess what? 20 years later, it comes out of the vault. We've checked on it during those years, don't worry. But it comes out, and it's beautiful. It made a brand new Winter Positive, and it prints beautifully, and the prints look as good as they did 20 years ago.